I want to say hi. I'm Bob Wise. I'm president of the Alliance for Excellent Education. And I've got to say, what an incredible gathering to have so many people, leaders from across the state and also nationally here on a Saturday afternoon. Like you say, just a few days, 2 weeks after an election. Now, I just want you to know I'm in a campaign too. The Alliance for Excellent Education is a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C. Our mission is that every child should graduate from high school, college, and career ready. And I approach it as a campaign. I'm out literally almost every day. We're talking about what needs to be done. I'm trying to organize people. Yes, I have to raise money for my organization. That's like a campaign too. The nice thing is, my wife pointed out to me though, is, Bob, you know, it's 5 years and they haven't run one negative ad against you yet. So I don't have quite the bruises that some of you did, although I did meet a representative last night who I want to know how in this country she did it. She ran unopposed. So I want that secret. But at any rate, we're all in a campaign, really. And it's about how we deal with significant challenges, but most importantly, how we significantly boost learning outcomes. I heard the agenda last night from the directors of the two organizations, and it's a phenomenal agenda today. You've got some great speakers. I feel privileged. You're going to hear later from Susan Patrick with INACOL. Susan's over here. And Susan, I'm in the warm-up act because then you tell them how it gets done. But I appreciate the chance to be on the road. Now, I'm going to recommend a book to you, not my book, although feel free, still on Amazon. But no, I'm going to recommend a book to you that if you haven't read it, you should. And it's Disrupting Class by Clayton Christensen and Michael Horn. Michael is one of the ones most involved in the Digital Learning Council that former Governor Bush, Jeb Bush, and I are working on together, and I'm going to talk more about that. But Disrupting Class really lays out the concept of what we're going to be talking about today, makes some predictions that I think are exactly correct, and indeed may be understated, and points to the necessity for digital learning and online learning, such as we're going to be talking about today. So we've got three crises, and those of you who will be starting the next session of the legislature, the new governor, and the 27, incidentally, across the country, the largest number at any time since 1950. How's that for a Jeopardy question? You're going to be confronted, as you have been confronted, but think of when you come into session, whether it's January or February, whenever it is, with the challenges that you've got. And so here they are in education, and we're going to talk about each one of these. Everybody flush? Yeah, okay. Mounting teacher shortages. We're going to talk about the demographics of teachers and increase global demands for skilled workers. So what's the challenge is we've got to do more and we've got less to do it with. So how do we do it? First of all, I want to talk to you. This will be a chart of all state revenues, not just the state of Georgia's. We'll talk about that in a moment. So if you look at the first 4 years, what you see is that's the percentage of increase that all states enjoyed in budget revenues. So taxes were actually coming in at increased amounts because the economy was doing well. And you can see it goes until 2008. Now, this is the last 2 years. So you see it drops below the line, and you see that it's somewhere around 4 or 5%, about 4% less overall. Once again, all states, not just education, but all state budgets. Now, what is there that's distinctive about those 2 years? Stimulus package. There is $787 billion of stimulus money that went out to states, whether in the form of tax cuts or direct funding or assistance on things such as Medicaid. So you've got about $750 billion that's reflected in that, so to prop it up. So what are we looking at for the next 3 years? Stimulus package expired last month, and there's not going to be another one. So this is what we're looking at in states. This is what now I call the General Motors moment. Think of GM 2.5 years ago. Demand for a greater product, far less money to produce it with. So what had to happen? They had to retool. They had to innovate. They had to change the way they did business. And so that's the same situation that education is looking at right now. These are just some general numbers. FY 2010 was almost a 7% reduction in state budgets overall from FY 2009. So you probably didn't, and to be honest with you, I've heard varying figures about Georgia. We picked this off of the Center for Budget and Policies, but I may be, am I high or am I low on the shortfall this year? About $403 million shortfall. Who, is the budget chair here? Okay. Am I low? Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, let me just say, if you get worried at night, I just came from Nevada, and there it is, their budget shortfall is 50% of their general fund. So you're positively physically flush compared to Nevada. But whatever the number is, you can see the challenge that's ahead. So once again, we need outcomes to be up, but we've also got less to do it with. We can't keep doing the same thing. If all we do is do the same thing with less dollars, then all we're going to do is get even less of a result. So, one of the solutions then, I won't say the only one, but one of the solutions then is obviously innovation. And that has been the resort, that's where most of business and industry have gone. And so in between 95 and 2002, technology accounted for 2/3 of all total growth and productivity in the U.S. and all growth in labor productivity. Think of that. Think of how technology has been used. So what about education? So the U.S. Department of Commerce surveyed 55 major industry sectors to determine how well each applied technology. And where was education? 55th out of 55. So another question can be, well, what about the cost? Yes, there is a capital investment in aspects of innovation. You often begin to see the return on that investment fairly quickly. But in one survey in Wisconsin, looking at the traditional brick-and-mortar system of education, it's about $10,000 a student. Using virtual schools, it was about $6,500 a student. Remember also, and Susan I think can speak to this later much more effectively than I, but remember also that with online learning, it is 24/7. It is adaptive. It means that instead of having that language teacher, whether it's Mandarin or Spanish or whatever it is, that only has 6 students in this school and 7 over here and 4 over here, that now that teacher is available to all those students at once, that there is that there can be direct interaction at any hour, that it can be scheduled for those students that you're trying to get them back into the system, credit recovery, or they dropped out and you're trying to get them back in. This is something that can be done on their schedule, what's convenient for them as opposed to what's convenient for the 7-hour traditional school day. So in terms of cost effectiveness, I believe that the data is being developed that quickly shows that despite whatever capital investment, you soon begin to see it. Now, so that cost is one issue. The other is teachers. Let's assume that right now the current teaching model is the teacher is the basic repository of knowledge in the classroom. In the federal law, No Child Left Behind, there's a requirement that every classroom have a qualified teacher. Qualified is not necessarily determined by how effectively those students learn, but it's determined by the certification. That is, did that teacher take X amount of courses in this particular subject matter, math or physics or whatever it is. And so, let's assume for a second that's the desirable model. I can talk with you about that in a second. But let's assume it's a desirable model. That model won't last very long. Look at the teacher demographics. 1/3 of our teachers are able to retire in the next 5 to 7 years. So those that have the most experience will soon be exiting the classroom. I took a look, there's a study that was done recently state by state, and in the state of Georgia, 43% of your teachers are 50 years or older, meaning they can exit fairly soon as well. So even if we think that the best model is one teacher standing up in front of 25 students and being responsible for all the content, we're not going to have those experienced teachers much longer. And I think this chart shows why. Now bear with me for a second. Starting at your left and going across, that's years of experience. So that's a teacher with that's a percentage of, and then going up here, a percentage of teachers in that category. These are national. So here, starting at the first one, that's 3% of teachers have 1 year experience or less. 3.5%, 3 years. We come over here, 15 years of experience, about almost 5% of teachers. So you can see the high level of experience going across in it for each group. And you can see that it's pretty well bunched up and that there's a lot of experience here in this sector, particularly we've got a lot of experience from grades from year 9 to say 23. So we got a lot of experience in the classroom. What year? Well, that was 1987 to 1988. So how are we looking for today? Today, our typical teacher, remember that bunching up that was in the middle? Today, the average typical teacher is 1 to 2 years of experience. We will lose almost half of our teachers that enter the classroom this year won't be there within 5 years. So, even if the model of having a, quote, qualified content teacher is the one, we don't have those qualified content teachers moving forward. But there's some other demographics I think that are important too. Finding the right teachers. I think you recognize that state. You know, my guess is you never have to urge people to be, say, go dogs against the two-lane green wave. We just try to keep our head above water. Yeah, it took a while to get that one out. So, state of Georgia, and incidentally, this is true across the country. I don't want you to think this is a unique Georgia. So, we're looking, what's one of the most important areas? STEM, science, technology, education, and math. And we really need to make sure we get more science and technology, math teachers, and certainly a lot more students. So how's Georgia looking? And incidentally, this number represents the entire country. You've got 440 high schools. You have 88 certified physics teachers. It's the same in West Virginia, where I'm from. It's the same anywhere. The result is you're not going to get a certified physics teacher in every one of these classrooms in a traditional brick and mortar way. You may be, but what you can do, so start thinking about not in terms of do I need to have a certified teacher in every way, but how do I marry the content of physics or chemistry or English language arts or whatever it is? How do I marry the content with the classroom? Now, I understood why it was we needed to depend on that one teacher in the classroom before we had modern roads, before we had, even after we had modern roads. I don't understand why we think we still have to work the same model when we have the internet. This is not to denigrate teaching in any way. And in fact, I would argue that in a blended classroom, that's where you have online learning and a teacher, that the teaching skills that what teachers are so good at really now are able to be brought to the fore. Because instead of that teacher having to be the sole repository of content for 25 students and mainly concentrating on getting the content out, now the teacher is able to blend that online content that's coming in, the highest quality. You can pull it down from anywhere literally in the world, and now that teacher can focus on the individual learning styles of each of those children. So you learn one way, you tend to learn another way, you got a third set of circumstances about how you learn, and now I as a teacher have more time to focus on that. And the other part of it is, some would say, well, yeah, Bob, but so the teacher's role changes slightly. The teacher becomes more of guidance and facilitator. But the teacher also has to have a good knowledge of the subject, but perhaps not that which would be considered qualified. But some would say, well, Bob, so are you just putting teachers in there sort of to mind the class? No. Because I also believe that with blended learning, something else happens. Remember what Benjamin Franklin said. Those who teach learn. So that teacher, that 2-year teacher who tends to dominate the curve now, that 2-year teacher over time, by working with that content knowledge coming in, now that teacher is learning every day as well, and will also then one day be both effective and certified. Okay. So let's turn to how we recruit, train, retain teachers. I'm going to give you 2 communities. What Michael Horn and Clayton Christensen write about in their book is something called the non-consumer. Now, who is the non-consumer? Think of, I'm going to take some of you back. Okay, yeah, there's some of you that have both gray hair or no hair. So I can use, Roy Bowen, you and I can use this example. Roy's good West Virginia. Actually, how many of you all have some West Virginia tie? That's what I thought. Go Mountaineers. Or Marshall, if that's where your heart is. So let me talk about 2 schools here. One is in Pickens, West Virginia, and the other is Humboldt High School in Humboldt, Iowa. Clayton Christensen and Michael Horn write about the non-consumer. So here's the example I'm going to use. Years ago, there used to be something called the radio. And back in the 50s and 60s, particularly in the 50s, I think it was, there tended to be high-end radios. The radio manufacturers tended to make high-end radios. And that was good. People were paying a lot of money for them. And they made high-end portable radios. Big, lots of batteries, big aerial. And they were expensive too. So along came an outfit called Sony. You may have heard of them. And Sony said, there's a certain block of consumer here, and there are 2 or 3 big companies competing for them. Who is it that's not buying those big radios? Who's the non-consumer? And so what they found was they found teenagers. And they found teenagers who did not have much money, but if you gave them a small radio with a tinny sound, admittedly, not the quality of the big ones, but much cheaper, and ran on batteries, they'd buy it. They'd take it to the beach, they'd take it with them on their picnics, they'd take it wherever the teenagers would go, they would take it. And so Sony found a non-consumer market. And so they built the tinny little radio, and one thing leads to another, and as you know, they dominate the market. And some of those large radio manufacturers are gone. Now, anybody remember the name Wang? Okay? Or CompuData. Okay? Well, there's a memorial put to them. They dominated the market. But what they didn't do was, while they kept focusing on the high end where they could make their money, they didn't focus on the non-consumer. And then along comes somebody that makes Radio Shack and others that makes a small, small computer, very cheap, but lots of people, and I was then like me at that time, could afford to buy it. And of course, those big names are gone now, and today the PC dominates, and of course now the laptop and so on. My point being, once again, so there's a non-consumer, and technology is always disrupting. Christensen and Horn write Disrupting Class, the previous book, and I really urge this to you for the basic concept, disruptive innovation, Innovator's Dilemma. Clayton Christensen, and Clayton Christensen in terms of the business books, and then Michael Horn and Christensen in terms of the education book, and I really commend those to you. So that's the theory. Well, who are the non-consumers in education? Well, one is rural schools, because they're not very big in some areas, and they're remote. Other consumers, those kids that have already dropped out of school are in alternative schools. Credit recovery, students that are trying to that need to make up credits, but who wants to spend time with them? That's where online learning, virtual schools, cyber schools, and so on have had their first penetration. But what we learn from disruptive technology, disruptive innovation, is it quickly moves into. So let's talk about Pickens High School for a second, Randolph County, West Virginia. I gave the it's so far up on the mountainside, on a mountaintop. It's in a rural county. Incidentally, this county is so large, it is larger than 6 states. And so the legislature actually has to provide a special appropriation to keep it open. Ordinarily, it wouldn't qualify, because there's nothing, you just can't move these kids the 25 miles across a mountain range to where the next school would be. So Pickens High School, I gave the commencement about right before I left office in 2004, and it had a graduating, incidentally, I love this one, had a graduating class of 2. And the motto there is, every child gets to be a valedictorian or salutatorian. So I finished my commencement speech, and incidentally, the power of education, 2 kids graduate. There were about 120 people in the audience. That was far more than the immediate families. Those were the entire communities that came to celebrate the education gains that their neighbor children had made. Anyway, it was quite moving. So I'm walking out. Well, I'll talk to you about that in a second. Humboldt, Iowa. Once again, 409 students, 27 teachers, once again, rural areas. So let's take a look at what each is doing. In Pickens, I'm walking out with the principal after the commencement speech, and I said, let's be fair with one another. I appreciate a rural school. Good golly, in West Virginia, you better. But how do you can't get these kids a language course. And he said, what are you talking about? He said, I've got the best Spanish instructor, one of the best Spanish instructors in the country. And I said, tell me how. How did you get her to Pickens? He pointed to a satellite dish. He said, she comes in every day from San Antonio. Fully interactive. Now this is 10 years, this is relatively old technology. This is 10 years ago. Fully interactive, fully accredited, and so we have an excellent Spanish program. We turn to Humboldt, Iowa. You think out in the middle of Iowa, away from any major area, offering AP courses online, facilitated by a classroom teacher. The teacher is a part of it. But the teachers significantly as well get their online certification. It's not just about students. It's about the professional development. And so it's now quality development that comes in from, once again, anywhere. So what are we teaching to? You see these lines that are running. So I want to point you to the red line first, because this now gets to challenge 3. So we've talked about costs and declining budgets. We've talked about teacher demographics and declining content teachers, experienced content teachers. So let's now talk about something going forward, and that is what we need to increase. We need to increase skill levels. Certainly in a state like Georgia that is revamped its economy so significantly from the economy of textiles and apparel and basic manufacturing to a technology-based, service-based, information-based economy. So what are the skills that we're teaching to in our schools? The red line, manual tasks. These are the tasks that you can't computerize. It's truck driving, it's hairdressing, it's things like that. So you've just about, this is 1960 and this is 2002. So you can see the progression over a 40-year period. So you can see here where it was at its heyday, and now there's a level at which it levels off because there's a point at which you don't want a computer behind a truck semi wheel. I don't really care whether a computer's doing my hair, but some others will. So these jobs are in decline. These are the bread and butter jobs for much of our last century. These are routine tasks, but ones that paid well. The old automobile assembly line, where one person stood in one spot all day, turning the same wrench or making the same adjustment or performing the same function, paid well, but routine tasks. Same thing whether it was in apparel or textiles or whatever, furniture manufacture, whatever it was. And you can see that the heyday of that was about 1970, and now it's begun to go down sharply. So what is it that's gone up? It's abstract tasks. This is the ability to take information in and to extrapolate, to draw conclusions, to work in a team, to be able to communicate with one another. And that's not just in high skyscraper bank buildings or consulting firms. That's also in what has been known as the traditional blue-collar occupations. That automobile assembly line is a far different place than it was just 20 years ago. And so what are we teaching to? And what are the skill levels? I looked at the college 2- and 4-year graduation rate for the state of Georgia. You're doing about what the nation is doing. You're a little lower in both areas, but you're still about where the national average is. But the challenge is the national average is nowhere near it needs to be. We've gone in 10 years, from 1995 to 2005, we've gone from being second in the world in 4-year college graduation rates to 15th. We've gone to about 10th in 2-year. That's not to, and I want to stress something. It's not we're educating worse. It's that a lot of other that we compete with are educating better. They're coming on harder and stronger. And so, and even if you're not in global competition, I don't believe that my nonprofit organization of 21 people is in global competition with a nonprofit in China. I do believe that everyone that in my office needs to have global skills if we're going to operate at the maximum effectiveness. And so, once again, that calls for how do we get the content knowledge and the experience to a lot of people that need. We have to greatly increase, whether you go with the president's goal of significantly increase, of once again leading the world in college graduation. I did not need a high school diploma in Charleston, West Virginia in 1966 to go get a good paying job in the coal mines, the steel mills, or the chemical plants. So 32% of all jobs were high school, were high school dropouts. This next bar is high school. So these folks got a diploma, didn't go any farther, got a diploma. So if you look at 1973, 72% of all jobs were being performed by high school diploma or less. Think about that for a second. High school diploma or less, and our economy was rocking. Yeah, we had an Arab oil boycott to kind of shake things up, but we were leading the world in so many different areas. High school diploma or less. So let's take a look and see how this is rapidly changing. That's some college, post-secondary, short of a 2-year degree. That's a 2-year degree. That's the 4-year degree, bachelor's, and that's graduate. So look what's happened in 40 years. 72% high school or less, to current 60% essentially post-secondary above. We have to make sure that we are getting the highest level content material to our students. So, there are lots of ways you do this. Obviously, one of the benefits of online learning and digital learning is it can be personalized. It permits each student to move at their pace. It permits you to do immediate formative assessments and to identify what each student's challenges and strengths are, and to focus on those and to intervene. It improves access to courses that prepare students for college. Rory, I don't know if you remember Gilmer County, West Virginia. It's in the middle of the state. It has something like 7,500 people, probably less than 1,000 in the school system. I'm not going to get a Mandarin instructor in Gilmer County. I'm probably going to have trouble getting a high order, I'm probably going to have trouble getting a calculus instructor. I'm probably going to have trouble getting a large number of those. I'm also going to have trouble as this older cohort. Boy, I tell you, once you get out of office, you start talking in terms of cohorts, you know you're not going back. You know, they just don't like cohorts down at the volunteer fire department, I found out. But as this older cohort of teachers retires, who are wedded to rural areas, for instance, we're going to have trouble getting new teachers to come in. And so what is it that we need to do to improve access to courses that prepare students for college? How is it that we make sure that every student that wants gets the benefit of an AP course, Advanced Placement, or an International Baccalaureate program, or any of the others? There's only one way that gets there. We do a state card on Georgia. We do it for every state. And I want to congratulate you because of 5 elements that are considered necessary, that we think are necessary for online learning, you've got all 5 of them. You want standards in technology literacy. Students are tested in technology literacy. Computer-based assessments are being offered. Initial teacher license requirements include technology. Initial principal license requirements include technology. And you've got all 5 of them. Now, stay at it and make sure they're real. You've got them. Make sure they're fully implemented. But there's more to come. You also have the Georgia Virtual School, which is fully accredited, offering high school level courses. You have the Georgia Cyber Academy. I believe it used to be the Georgia Virtual Academy, serving online charter schools, serving students K to 8. Teachers are Georgia certified and available online and by phone. Once again, personalized and high quality. So let's talk about the Digital Learning Council, because this is an area that I hope that you all will be closely involved in, and Patrick may want to talk about it a little later as well. This is an effort initiated by former Governor Jeb Bush in Florida. Florida probably does have the most advanced virtual school, Florida virtual schools in the country. It's provided the model for a lot of other states. And it's also proving cost effectiveness as well, and also has a unique reimbursement model. It's one of the few systems I've ever seen where you aren't paid based on, the district isn't paid based on seat time, it's based on whether or not the student actually passed the course, performed well in the course, by virtue of taking one of the Florida virtual school courses. But anyway, in August, Governor Bush and his foundation began to create the Digital Learning Council. He asked me, so it would be truly bipartisan, although I don't think there's a partisan aspect to this. This is something that everybody needs to be involved in. So the Alliance for Excellent Education joined with them. And the Digital Learning Council goal is to identify and promote the policies that promote technological innovations and spark transformational change. It has the Digital Learning Council is a diverse group of people. It's for-profit companies, nonprofits, educators, technology experts, philanthropic world, public policy think tanks, and it will only expand. And so what are the best strategies for digital change in public education? I don't know, well, let me ask you, some of you may be aware of something called the Data Quality Campaign. It's an organization, it's actually a group of organizations that have came together about 5 or 6 years ago to identify what are the 10 elements that are necessary for a state to have a true, workable, comprehensive, longitudinal data system. You know, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? Okay. When I was transitioning out of office back in 2005, if I had gone to the tarot card reader and said, what am I going to do in my next life? And she said, Bob, one day you are going to be passionate about something called comprehensive longitudinal data systems. I would have demanded my money back. I think it's this next guy coming in. You got us mixed up. The vibrations are wrong. I'm passionate about comprehensive longitudinal data systems because without data, we can't make decisions. Without data, the teacher in the classroom can't make the accurate decisions and so vital ones for each of his or her students. Without data, the legislators here can't make the literally $1 billion worth of decisions about what works and doesn't work in education and where should resources be allocated. So the Data Quality Campaign identified 10 elements that were necessary for every state to have a comprehensive longitudinal data system that meant something. Well, this is what the Digital Learning Council seeks to do as well, only for digital learning. What happened here? There we go. And so the issues that are being discussed, online learning, blended learning, the teacher and online learning in the classroom, virtual schools, where the student is by himself or herself but learning, social networking, what are the latest technological class. The exciting thing about technology is the explosion. And let me just offer an observation to particularly those elected officials. I served a number of years in legislative bodies, a number of years in elected office. I learned this lesson. We can't legislate technology. Every time we try, what happens is by definition, the legislative process is getting a consensus. By the time we arrive at the consensus in a legislative body, the technology has now leapt ahead another 5 years. A lot of people, I was interested, I was sitting in a forum with another former member of Congress. I like it in Washington, they call out former members of Congress to come speak to school groups because we don't have anything else to do. So I was in a forum with a former member of Congress, and he was waxing rhapsodic about the 1996 Telecommunications Act, because he'd been on the committee and had been instrumental in it. First of all, don't talk to, my advice is in the year 2010, don't talk to middle schoolers about the 1996 Telecommunications Act. But at any rate, so he's going on about how wonderful the 1996 Telecommunications Act was and how it really sort of brought the telecom companies and the cable companies and the breaking up of AT&T and all that, and it really resolved a number of these issues. I didn't have the heart to say the problem with the 1996 Telecommunications Act was that by the time it was passed, it was way obsolete. Technology had already leapfrogged 2 generations and a whole new set of issues. What we can do at what can be done at the legislative, it's sort of like riding a horse. You don't try to control or steer that, or guide that. You don't try to steer that horse. If you can just sort of guide it and keep it on track, but understanding you don't want a difference from riding horses, you don't want to discourage the innovation. What you want to do as much as anything is make sure you do no harm, and to make sure that you create a regulatory environment that doesn't stifle innovation. Yes, you want to make sure that at the end of the day, all these students are meeting your standards, but you know something, you don't want to tie them, in the process, the input side of it, you don't want to you don't want to set up an online system that mirrors a brick and mortar system. Because now what you've done is, all you've done is layer an innovation and tie it to a tradition that you're trying to improve. The better thing to do is to let innovation flourish, set the standard that you want to reach at the end in terms of here's what we want our children to know in X, Y, and Z. And my guess is, and indeed the studies already confirm, you will get as good or better results from online and virtual learning than you are from the brick and mortar ones. So let me give you a quick example of what I'm talking about. There is one state, not Georgia, that shall remain nameless. There is one state that requires, that says online learning is great, as long as it's taught by a teacher that is certified in our state. Well, that's helpful. The one I like even more, another state, also nameless, permits online learning as well, as long as the online instruction comes from not more than one contiguous district away. That's like telling me that I can order from Amazon, but I got to go pick the book up at the local store. So why am I not just going to the local store? So the key is, what are the rules, regulations, and standards that are in place that may be stifling this innovation? And this innovation is coming in many different ways, and we can't predict them all. Gaming, for instance, is increasingly a strategy for keeping students engaged. And so as you move forward in this, this is going to be a critical issue. And this is one of the things that the Digital Learning Council seeks to address. Some basic issues that will be promoted by the Digital Learning Council: access for all students, the funding of innovative technology, how do we encourage high quality content? Sure, there are going to be some vendors out there that are putting out schlock. And we've got to make sure that the students, but at the same time, we don't want to, in the name of protecting our students, ward them off from very encouraging and promising technologies. In effectively utilizing providers, promoting and giving students credit for this, and figuring out ways to provide accountability. If you're in Washington, December the 1st, Governor Bush and I will be convening the Digital Learning Council First Summit, where these basic principles will be rolled out. We hope that they are bold and transformational, obviously. I want to stress something. They are local and state focused. This is not a federal initiative. They are local and state focused because it is states and local school districts that basically administer education. And it is states and local school districts that will be deciding how to implement innovative devices. And what I have observed is, having served in Washington as well as in the state government, it is in states where you see the innovation take place. We have something in my organization called Bounce Back. My organization actually tends to work at the federal level, but we work in states extensively because we believe that nothing original originates in Washington. It bounces back from states and local localities. So state-focused, all these elements that need to be measurable, and they need to form a long-term roadmap. So we've talked about the three challenges. We talked about costs, we've talked about teacher demographics, and we've talked about the need to greatly improve the results because the state of Georgia and the United States cannot meet its workforce needs unless we significantly increase the skill levels of our students. So here they are. So here's the ultimate challenge. This is the condition as we know it, as it exists today in this country and has been for about the last 40 years. We know this. We know that 3 of our students are going to drop out. 10 ninth graders, we know that 3 of them will drop out within 4 years. We know this. We know that 3 more are going to finish high school, but they will not have the skills they need to function in a modern workplace. If they go to your community colleges, they're going to need remediation. Remediation is the taxpayer paying twice for the same education. And so it's a heck of a system we've got right now in terms of outcomes. And this is when budgets were good, when 6 out of 10 finish their high school years without the skills they need to truly function in a modern economic society. So that leaves you all with a choice. I was thinking right after the election, I was thinking of what each governor and each legislature is going to be confronting in January, when the governor has to, of each state, whether it's January or February, steps up and makes his or her first State of the Union message. And there's a tendency. You got less money, and you've got less money, you got more demands. So there are two choices, or there's a tendency. The tendency can be simply to hunker down and just simply, I'll take another 4 or 5% off across the board. I won't change anything. I may lay some people off over here, I may furlough. I basically won't change anything, and we will just do less with less. And then we'll ride it out and hope the economy recovers, and particularly within 2 years, so that I'm in good shape to run for re-election in 4. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to say, wait a minute, this model no longer works. That we aren't able to, that we weren't getting great outcomes before, and now we've got less money to do the same lackluster product with. So here's the choice. Be boldly innovative or badly irrelevant. Because if you hunker down, if you say, I'm not going to embrace the latest that technology has, then what you're going to do is you're going to get through the next couple of years, but by 3 and 4 and 5 years, you're irrelevant because you won't have boosted outcomes. GM right now is turning out the Malibu, which is a pretty decent car. It's going to offer its first IPO. It's coming out of bankruptcy. It had to shed a lot of people. It had to greatly revisit how it was making vehicles. I mean, many of you have had to do the same thing in your businesses. You couldn't do it by doing the same thing. You can't do the same thing in education. We can't meet each of those 3. So here's the choice: boldly innovative or badly irrelevant. So remember our 4. That's no longer satisfactory. It's not satisfactory for them. They can't pull our economy anymore. They used to be able to do it. But what's not satisfactory is for their colleagues who aren't in that picture. It's not satisfactory for them, but quite frankly, it's not satisfactory for us. Because these 4 essentially pulled our economy. Today, the 90% of the fastest growing jobs in our society, fastest growing, highest paying, 90% today require post-secondary. And do you remember that chart from before? Current jobs, 60% require post-secondary. You don't get there from here. And so that's why your choice, the choice that each of you, particularly in elected office, but those of you who are in the policy world and business world and others, have to make about you be innovative or irrelevant. I know where they want you to be. Thank you very, very much.